Have you ever been so frustrated by a student or a class because they refuse to change their disruptive, unmotivated, apathetic behavior? Hi, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Cecilia Temes, and I'm an experienced educator and consultant. And I help passionate history teachers feel confident and competent by sharing tips, strategies, and advice to help you teach like an influential educator. If you enjoy learning about these topics, be sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so that you know exactly when my next video drops. Now, to be clear, this video is not about controlling our students. Take it from somebody who knows you can literally drive yourself crazy trying to make yourself responsible for every decision and action your students ultimately decide to take. And I just want to remind you, especially for all my new teachers out there, that is not your responsibility, and that is completely out of our control. And if you try to take that burden upon yourself, you are going to burn yourself out. Our role as educators is merely to influence our students' transformation and set up an environment where they're actually able to create this lasting change within themselves. Now, you cannot be the one to change your students' behavior for them. Now, I know I'm about to ruffle some feathers, but I firmly believe this, and my experience in working with 10 plus generations of students has proven this true time and time again. But it's the primary reason why I don't believe in referrals and I don't believe in detentions. And I gotta tell you that probably in my entire career, I only had maybe one referral, and I never resorted to utilizing that because I don't necessarily believe that punishment creates permanent change. Self-awareness and support creates permanent change. The decision for change rests with your students. Our mission is to kind of unlock that potential and give our students a new perspective through which they can see themselves and make different choices. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing 3 tips to help your students and support your students in that self-transformation and create the environment in which this change, this permanent change, can take place. So the first thing that we need to do in order to change and reprogram our students' behavior is to listen and learn. So I have a bit of a confession to make. I am personally not very savvy about cars. And I can remember driving to college in my little 1999 Chevy Trailblazer. Because of the car's age and because I wasn't very car savvy, I had to pay extra special attention and observe my vehicle and what it did and listen to the sounds it made in order for me to get to the root of the problem and accurately be able to explain to a mechanic, what was going on with my car, so that in turn the problem could be diagnosed and we could get to a solution to get my car fixed. In the same way, before we jump to any conclusions, it's so imperative that we actually take the time to stop, listen, and observe our students' behavior before jumping to conclusions. We need to take the time to listen and observe our students in the same way that a doctor, for example, would diagnose patients. We cannot prescribe a medication or consequences, in this case as teachers, without first taking the time to understand, assess, and observe the problem. So again, the first thing that we need to do in order to support our students' behavioral transformation is to study them. Do they seek attention? Do they behave this way in all their classes? Is there a teacher they get along with? What are they like at home? What are they like socially with their peers? Do they have past traumas that trigger certain behaviors or insecurities that trigger certain behaviors? What do they like? What do they dislike? What is their personality like? So this first phase is about investing the time to do your homework. So the reason why you want to invest the time in really getting to know your students and understand their behavior is because this same information is what will provide you the key and the means by which you can support students in their behavioral transformation. Now, the other thing that plays a pivotal role and something we need to consider is our own personal emotional intelligence. And we have to get really honest with ourselves. Like, are we annoyed by our students simply because they have a personality that we clash with and we just assume that they're misbehaving? Or are we objectively as objectively as possible, assessing a behavior that truly is detrimental to their learning, to their advancement, to their growth. Because it's one thing to be annoyed by a personality and another to want to support our students to change because you see that their decisions are hindering their potential. Phase 2 is to win your students over. So in this particular phase of the transformation, you want to leverage the insight and the information from phase 1 to actually earn your students' respect and admiration. Now, if it's an entire class period, the same process applies. You want to appeal to your class by leveraging that insight that you gained and creating an environment that appeals to your students' likes, interests, and their strengths. So what does this actually look like in our classroom? This could look like creating lessons or activities that center around their interests, taking the time to listen to our students' expectations of us and of each other, maybe allowing them to participate in creating classroom expectations or procedures, being consistent, being fair. Getting your students to like you is less about you being the cool teacher and more about you being the dependable teacher. I also highly urge you to try out an incentive-based classroom management system. Punishments, always vibe control. Incentive-based, if done correctly, vibe motivation to your students. Now, just to prove my point, either personally or as a teacher, what is that one thing that typically gets you instantaneously motivated? Let me know in the comments below. I'm gonna be honest. For me as a teacher, it was always the darn gene pass. Now, phase 1 and 2 are only useful information if you know what to do with that. Once you have the insight and once you have rapport with your students, you need to follow through with phase 3, and that is reinforce positive behavior. And you also want to provide self-reflective tools and strategies for students to reevaluate their own behavior and redirect themselves. Now, this will only work if you do this faithfully and consistently. You have to trust in the process. Change doesn't happen overnight. This child did not start to behave this way necessarily from one day to the next unless something happened. But now comes the process of helping our students shift their self-image. Now, the best book I've ever read about the psychological process that really backs up the phases that I share with you in this video are provided by a very well-known book in psychology called Psycho-Cybernetics, and I'll go ahead and share that up here, and I will link it down below so you can check it out if you want to and read it on your own time. But this book by Maxwell Maltz will literally give you the step-by-step process of the psychological shifts that happened and kind of the journey of changing human behavior and how human behavior can be altered. Now, one of the claims made in this book is that psychologically speaking, our lives, our behaviors have been shaped by experiences in our lives. And of course, those experiences shape our self-perception. Now, the interesting thing is that our minds will always find a way to align our behavior and our actions to whom and what we think we are. So that means that if we had a learning experience early on in our life that made us feel like a failure, our mind is going to direct us to act in ways that reflect the fact that we feel like failures. Let me give you an example. Let's say you had a student that had a teacher the previous year that was maybe not as patient as you. Or maybe their personality did not align to your students. Or maybe your student was taught in ways that didn't align to their learning strengths, therefore dashing their confidence. That student is going to show up to your class unmotivated, disinterested, and come in with that belief that they're failures at history, so why even try? And so they're going to occupy their time and their energy in maybe acting up in class to possibly gain your attention and distract themselves and distract you from the fact that they have a lack of confidence in their ability. So that acting up is a reflection of their lack of self-worth, self-confidence, and their ability. So this is where positive reinforcement steps in. So if you've taken the time to learn about your students and you know they feel dumb, quote unquote, or maybe they can't read or they're not interested in your subject, which, by the way, if you want to learn a couple tips and strategies for teaching history in an interesting way, be sure to check out my video, Teach History in an Interesting Way, by clicking the link down below when you're done watching this video. So since you've taken the time to learn your students' self-perception, you know what angle to approach from and what's going through your student's mind, so you can praise specifically and target those areas where students feel the least confident in. Because when you target these areas where your students have that self-doubt, you are going to convince their psyche, because remember, they respect you now. Phase 2, you've earned their respect. They believe in you. You're a dependable teacher. You have no reason to lie to them. You will convince their psyche, their mind, that they are not what their experience made them believe they are. Now, this next part is so important. If you, as their teacher, can operate from a full place of faith in your student and confidence in your student's ability to behave, to make better decisions, to participate, to master material, to be less disruptive, the confidence that you have in them, that confidence that you demonstrate to your students, and those positive reinforcements and that positive praise will help prove to your students that they really are smart, that they can really choose to behave differently, that just because they've been pegged as this naughty kid all their life doesn't mean they have to stay there. You're essentially going to help the student break down their old identity. Now, I know this is a lot of psychological information, but my first year teachers or my newer colleagues, hear me out on this one. Essentially, what your goal is to convince your students that they are not who they thought they were, by gaining their trust so that they actually believe you when you do praise them for something good that they did. And also supporting your students by creating a classroom environment that supports their needs and allows them to thrive. And if you're curious about how you can set up a proactive classroom management system, you cannot miss my video on proactive classroom management procedures, and I'll go ahead and link it down below so you can check it out at the end of this video. But essentially, when you do all these things combined, you are going to allow your students space to reflect and believe a different story about themselves. Sometimes all our students really need is somebody who listens, who takes the time to connect and click with them, and that helps them ease and erase those doubts, those self-doubts that they have about themselves. And you can support life-changing beliefs, lasting life-changing beliefs in your students, which, let's be real, this is what most of us got into this profession for to begin with. If you want to know how you can influence and support your students, if you want to learn how to create an environment that is conducive to successful and equitable classroom management, if you want to gain the insight about how you can connect with your class so that you can eliminate classroom management issues once and for all, click the link below to learn more about my Mindful Classroom Management program. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, class dismissed.